Hi, everyone. Welcome in. Thank you so much for joining me on today's webinar about using Google Analytics to increase your website sales. So I've got quite a lot of stuff to cover, so I'm going to be moving and probably talking pretty quickly, but you will have access to this video to rewatch afterwards if that's helpful. So the agenda for today's webinar, I'm going to start out with a really quick introduction of my background and then a high-level overview of Google Analytics for those of you who aren't as familiar with it. And then from there, I'm just going to jump straight into my top 4 reports, my favorite reports that I use to analyze website data to find opportunities to increase sales. So during that part, I'm going to be walking through some real examples of analysis that I've done in hopes that you'll be able to take that framework and mindset and use it for your own analysis that's applied to your site. So without further ado, let's jump right in. So I see some familiar names on the registration list, so a few of you might already know me. So great to see you guys attending. For those of you who don't know me, it's nice to virtually meet you. My name is Andie Mace, and I currently work as a project manager for Grow a Studio. But throughout my career, I've worked in a lot of different marketing analyst roles, and that's where I picked up a lot of the skills that I now have when it comes to Google Analytics. I am absolutely still learning more about Google Analytics every day. It's a bit of a monster, so I think I'll always be learning more, but that is kind of the most exciting thing about it. So what is Google Analytics? As I said, this is going to be a really high-level overview. If you've never used Google Analytics before, I would definitely recommend familiarizing yourself with some of the basics beforehand. I mean, well, you can't do it beforehand now, but I would maybe suggest familiarizing yourself and then coming back and rewatching this video, as I feel it'll be more beneficial, just because at that point, you'll hopefully have a better idea of the different metrics I'm talking about, which I think will be one of the big things that is helpful for today's webinar. So Google Analytics is a free tool that collects data on your website traffic. And this data can tell you several different things, but some of the biggest kind of categories of things that it can tell you are who is visiting your site in terms of demographic, where are they coming from, how are they interacting with your site, and what are they buying on your site? And there's a lot more that it can tell you, but these are kind of the most important for me in what I do. And one thing to mention that I think is really unique about Google Analytics is that, what people are buying on your site, that's something that you can see in the back end of your store. But the unique thing about Google Analytics is that you can kind of merge together different types of data to get a really detailed look at your customer journey and how your customers are acting. So for example, if you know what your most popular product is because you can see it on your admin center, but you might not know what the most popular product is within people who are coming from organic search. So that is something that you can find out with Google Analytics, which I think is a really unique and positive thing. So how does Google Analytics work? It uses cookies, which are basically a unique identifier that it attaches to your browser. And from there, Google uses that unique ID to track site actions, how people are interacting with your site, different browsing patterns on your site, and repeat visitors. Again, there's more things that it can track, but these are kind of the biggest categories that I look at pretty often. And then lastly, in the general overview, I just wanted to talk through some best practices when analyzing data with Google Analytics. These are just things that I like to have in the back of my head as I'm looking through Google Analytics. I just find that these kind of help me stay grounded and focused on, what my goals are when I'm looking at such a large amount of data. So the first is always remembering that the customer journey can be a long one. So some actions that may not seem directly linked to conversions can actually be indirect contributors to sales. So an example would be, maybe you have one page that sees a huge increase in views. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to see an increase in sales. It kind of depends on the context, which is my next point, but it could be is the point. It just is really dependent on why it saw a huge increase in views. But this is just why it's really important to make sure when you're coming in to analyze data, you know what your goal is, and you use that goal to kind of determine what your key metrics are. And the next best practice is to always put your data in context. So as you guys know, I'm sure that every business is unique in terms of, who your audience is, what your business goals are, what your customer journey is like. And it's important to always consider that uniqueness of your business and your industry when you're analyzing data. That way you can kind of determine what it means specifically for your business, because it might mean something different for your business than for another business. So just make sure you always have that context around the data when you're analyzing it. The next thing is kind of another way to put the data in context, and it's to think about relationships between metrics. So I generally say that a single standalone metric is just a vanity metric. So it looks good, or maybe it looks bad, but it doesn't actually tell us anything actionable. So what I always like to do is consider how the different metrics relate to one another. And that's how I'm able to uncover opportunities that might increase sales. And this is something you'll probably notice me doing a lot throughout this webinar. And then the last thing to always remember is that Google Analytics will not inherently increase your sales. Analyzing the data within Google Analytics will give you insight to make changes that will increase your sales. But it is ultimately the changes that you make and the tests that you run and the iterations that you do on those changes going forward that will lead to increased sales. Okay. So jumping into the first report, and actually the first two reports are going to be within the acquisition section of Google Analytics. But this first one, to get to it, you would go to acquisition, all traffic, and then to the channels report. So a lot of the reports are going to look like this, with a graph of traffic or users in this case on top, and then a table kind of breaking down into the specific channels or whatever grouping that is, and the metrics specific to each of those channels. And for this particular report, I think it's a great way to kind of see what's working with your acquisition efforts, what might not be working, and where there might be opportunity to expand into new acquisition efforts. So there are different reports that show you an overview of acquisition, but I just find this one the most useful because I think that channel groupings are, they're detailed enough that you get a good idea of where traffic is coming from, but they're not so detailed that it's hard to see kind of overall trends. So that's why I use this one pretty often. And the first part of this report is that I'm going to talk about is this top part with the traffic and traffic graph. And I'm actually going to click through onto Google Analytics demo analytics account. I'm going to do this on a couple of the reports, but there are some reports where I just didn't have enough data within this demonstration account, or it wasn't relevant. So I had to take screenshots. But just to kind of show you how I set this up to analyze it, I'm using this demo account. And so the first thing I would do would be to set the time range to 3 to 6 months out. If I'm analyzing trends, that's a pretty good time frame to have it at. And click into there. And right now, this graph is set to show daily data. So each of these data points is the sum of how many users visited the site during a day. And it's really volatile, as you can see. So I usually like to either view in week form or in month form, just because this helps me see trends a little bit better, because this data isn't quite as volatile. So that's how I would get this set up. But I am actually going to jump back into our slide deck, because The actual example that I want to talk you guys through is from an actual one of my client sites. And so I wanted to maintain that anonymity. But for this particular site, the time frame that I have it set to is right around the time when COVID hit. And as you can see, there's a pretty big increase that is maintained for a while right here at the end of March and the beginning of April. And I know, and you know, and we know that that was right around the time that people started going into lockdown for COVID. So, you know, one would assume that this increase had something to do with that. I mean, that was a really big change that happened right around this time. And that isn't necessarily something that I would want to repeat or could repeat. But if this was a different time frame and COVID wasn't in play and I saw this kind of increase, I would want to take a deeper look at why that happened, whether it was changes in the market, you know, your industry, changes within your audience, or perhaps it was something that you changed within your business or your marketing efforts that led to an increase in traffic. And, you know, something you did around that time, because that would definitely be something that you'd want to try and recreate to see if you could get another increase in traffic. So that's why I like to identify those trends here, just so I can see, you know, where are things going up? Why did they go up? And can I repeat that? You know, now if you see a seasonal trend, usually that's not something that you can recreate. But if you see something like this and you're not sure why it happened and it's not seasonal, definitely look into more of what happened during this time frame, so you can see why you got that increase and if you can recreate it. So the other thing that I use this graph for is to isolate abnormalities in data. And for this particular screenshot that I have, I've actually clicked into the referral grouping in the main report here. So I would just double click on this little blue link if I was in the actual analytics report, and it'll take me to a report that looks like this, which is just the report on all of the referral traffic. And so it's broken down by different referral websites, and then up top you've got a graph of all referral traffic. And I usually click into each channel to see what the trends look like within that channel, and if there are any, you know, if there's anything that might provide insight on how to increase sales. And so for this particular site, again, this is a real site, and I've got these links blurred out for anonymity. And I saw, obviously, the reason I clicked into this is because I saw this peak in April, and I wanted to know why that happened. I know there was a peak in referrals, but I'm not sure which referrals was the cause of this jump in traffic. So the next thing that I would do upon arriving here would be to click into each one of these individual links, and it'll take me to a report on traffic just from that link, that referral source. And what I'm looking for is to see if any of these referral sites have the same bump in traffic that I'm seeing right here, because we would be able to assume then that this bump was caused by that site. And after clicking through all of these, what I found was that there was an exact replica of this increase from a forum site and from a spam site. And right off the bat, I would go ahead and get rid of that spam site. I'd put a filter to filter that traffic out. But for this situation, you know, I also see an increase in forum traffic, and it's really the same exact increase. So because the spam site is there, I would assume that the traffic from the forum had something to do with this, like maybe a spam bot got a hold of that link and sent a bunch of traffic. But let's say the spam site wasn't in the equation and I just saw an increase in forum traffic from this forum. That would be a really interesting thing to look further into to see why that increase happened, why that forum post or forum in particular gained popularity just for that short period of time. And is there a way that I can make that happen again to get that bump in traffic? So, you know, one way that you could do this would maybe be to post on social media about that particular forum post to see if you can get more traffic to that forum, because we know that there are a lot of people when they do arrive on that forum that refer to click on the link that refers to your site. But again, in this exact situation, I would say likely it has to do with the spam site, and my course of action would be to block that and carry on and look for more trends. So the last thing that I like to do, and I'm going to talk about for the channels report, is looking at the bottom half of that report, which is the table that breaks down performance on each of these different channels. And this is a great place to try and find different opportunities for us to expand into different channels. So what I do here, and this is a really common trend of what I do in a lot of my reports, especially when I'm looking for opportunities to increase sales, is I look and try to find, I try to find groupings or particular areas of the business that are sending a lot of traffic to this, or not sending very much traffic to the site, but are contributing a lot of revenue, which would probably likely mean that they have a pretty good e-commerce conversion rate. And the reason that I look for these sites is that I view them as opportunities, because if we are able to increase traffic to them, we'll see a really nice increase in revenue, because we know that people from these channels convert well. So we would want to send more of that traffic versus more traffic from social, which obviously has a pretty low conversion rate. So if our goal is sales, it wouldn't make sense to really try and focus on social for this unique situation. Now, so I see here that paid search has a 2.5% conversion rate, and so does referrals. So right off the bat, I'm looking and seeing that those would probably be opportunities that I'd want to expand into. And so, I would probably want to funnel more money into paid search to see if we could get a little bit more paid search traffic. And, I would be monitoring to make sure that we maintain that same conversion rate and saw the increase in revenue that we were expecting. And then, of course, if not, scaling back and kind of reevaluating. And then same thing on referrals. It's a little bit different on referrals, because I'd want to click into the referrals section to see what referral links we were getting revenue from. And if there was like a pattern or a specific category of referral links that were bringing in a lot of revenue, I'd probably want to go in and see if we can create more of those links. Maybe I'd try and implement a specific backlinking strategy to acquire more of those links that we know convert well. So that is recognizing opportunities. The second acquisition report that I'm going to talk about is the Google Search Console report, and it's specifically the landing pages report. Now, this report is something that you actually have to configure to be able to see this data, and I will provide some resources in the follow-up email telling you how to do this, but this is also something that we would set up for you if you are the winner of the technical optimization that you're entered into a drawing for by attending this webinar. So this is a great place to kind of guide where you're focusing and what you're focusing your SEO on. But a quick disclaimer is that I really do believe that this should only be a small part of what informs your strategy, and you really should be doing a lot of different research outside of this for a comprehensive SEO strategy. But this is a great place to start and kind of inform where you take the research going forward. But this is a report that shows a breakdown of all the landing pages that people are going to from organic search, and when they're finding you in organic search, what pages they're landing on. And the first thing that I do when I get to this report, I don't really use the graph on this report much, but one thing to point out is that I've got this set for a really long date, because I want enough data that it makes sense for this particular webinar, but usually I wouldn't have it set for that long if I was analyzing real site data, because you wouldn't need that much time to get, a decent amount of significant data. But anyways, the first thing I do when I would get here is I would make sure that the amount of pages that I'm seeing in this table is set to what I want it to be set at. And usually by default, it's set to 10. It wasn't in this case because I think I might have linked it when it was set to 1,000. But for most of the sites that I work on, I would either want to set it to 50 or 25 URLs showing. And the reason for that is I'm going to do it for 50 for this site, but because I know that it's a pretty big site, and I want 50 of the top URLs who are sending the majority of the traffic to the site to be showing up here. And the reason I want these URLs to analyze is because I know that these URLs are doing well to some extent, and that making changes on them would probably have a bigger effect than making changes on pages that, you know, are getting one person in terms of traffic per month. And I set it to 50 and not, you know, like 1,000, because I don't want too many pages that I'm going to be overwhelmed. You know, you have to start somewhere, and these top 50 pages are a great place to start. So when I get to this page, the low hanging fruit for me is going to be the bounce rate column. And usually you would not see all 0% bounce rates. Usually I see between like 25 and 75 for a normal page, and then closer to 75 for a page that has long form content on it. But usually if I see a bounce rate that's higher than 75 or maybe 80, I would want to know why it has such a high bounce rate. The reason that I call this low-hanging fruit is because we know that these pages are already ranking. They're already sending a decent amount of traffic to the site. So half the SEO battle is already done. What we need to work on is fixing whatever's on the page that's causing people to not convert and to leave as soon as they get to the page. So that is why I like to focus on this first and foremost, because I do find it to be a little bit of an easier and more surefire way to see results. A lot of times, if you have a high bounce rate, it is going to be a problem with what's on the page, and you can make changes to the page that are going to make people either convert better in terms of sales, or convert better in terms of clicking through and engaging a little bit more with your site. But again, this is not realistic. So, you know, I can't really tell you which of these that I would look at because they're all 0%. But the other situation that you could have if you have a high bounce rate is that the pages that or the keywords that your page is ranking for are not relevant to what's actually on the page. I don't find this to be as common, but it does happen. And in that case, you would need to do a little bit more work to try and make sure that what you're targeting on the page is you're targeting the right keywords that are relevant to, you know, the content that you have. But those are two pretty straightforward things that you can do to try and increase the amount of sales that you're getting from organic search. The second thing that I like to do is I like to look at the position of these pages, and I like to find pages that are between either at the bottom of the first page or the top of the second page, and I like to optimize those. The reason that I like to do this is because there's been a lot of research that there's a big group of people that don't make it to the second page of Google search results. And there's another big group of people who don't even make it to the bottom of the first page. So if you have a URL that's kind of at the top of the second page and it moves on to the first page, it's going to make a really big difference because you're accessing a whole new group of people who you didn't previously have. And the same thing with going from the bottom of the first page to the top of the first page, moving up just a couple of spaces in ranking can make a really big difference in the clicks that you're getting and the impressions that you're getting. So these are, in some ways, are kind of low-hanging fruit as well, though they do require a little bit more work to try and raise up a few spaces. It's not a walk in the park, but it is a great opportunity to try and gain a little bit more traffic from organic search. And Google right now shows, I believe, 7 results on the first page. So the range that I would be looking at to optimize would be in between maybe like 6 and 9. With 6 being in the bottom of the first page and 9 being the top of the second page. And I would want to go through this entire list of my top 50 URLs and kind of make note of which ones fall in that section. So, you know, there's kind of quite a few that do for this particular data set. Like this is one, 6.3, 7, you know, I've got a couple up here, 6.7. So I just want to go through here and find that group and write them or document them on another page. So I know that this is like the good opportunity URLs. And then to choose out of those which ones I wanted to optimize first, I would look and see if any of them first are making any revenue. Because if they are making revenue, then I'm pretty certain that they are working for somebody somehow. So if we were to get more people to that page, we know that people are already converting there, and we're not going to have to fight that second battle of then, you know, we've gotten to the first page, now we need to get people to convert. We know people are converting. So that would be the first thing I'd look at. If you don't have any pages making money or you've already optimized those pages, the next thing I would look at is what their click-through rate is. And I'd look to optimize things that have a low click-through rate. And the reason, again, is that these are the ones that we're going to be able to make the biggest difference on, because your click-through rate increases a lot when you kind of change from the second page to the first page, or first page bottom to first page top. Like something like this, which is for almost 5% click-through rate and position 38, which first is pretty unrealistic, but I don't know, it's a weird URL, so maybe that is real. But if I saw something that had a 5% click-through rate on the second page, I'm not sure that I'd want to optimize that one first, because it's already doing well and sending a good bit of traffic. I might prefer to optimize something like this, which has a really low click-through rate, but it's on the second page, and we would potentially see a really big jump in click-through rate if it moved on to the first page. So that's kind of where my mind would go there. Now, a quick disclaimer on these is editing pages that are doing well in terms of SEO is to be really careful to never remove any content unless it's absolutely necessary. Because you just want to be really careful that you don't mess up anything that's already causing them to rank where they are. So just always be really focused on making sure that you're adding more high quality content that really benefits the user when you are making changes to any of these pages. Okay, so jumping back to our slide deck, the next report that I'm going to talk about is the site search terms report, which is under the behavior section. And this is something that also has to be configured, and something that I'll provide resources on in the follow-up email so that you can configure that. But this is honestly one of my favorite, and what I think is one of the most underrated reports in Google Analytics. And the reason that I like it so much is that I think it's a great spot to uncover site usability issues, because your users are literally telling you what they're looking for. They're telling you what they can't find. They're telling you what they want to find. So it's a really unique opportunity to get into the customer's brain. And if you hadn't known by now, this is obviously going to be a table of what people are searching in your internal site search functionality on your site. So there's a couple different things that this report I use this report for. And the first is going to be that I use the report to tailor site content to what users are searching for. So if I see that I have a lot of users searching for something that I don't have site content on, but it's relevant to my business, I would want to go in and create content that is relevant to that search term so that people are finding it when they search on my site. The second thing is adjusting your site navigation so that users can more easily find things that they're searching for often. So in this case, you might have that content they're searching for on your site, but they can't easily find it, so they're having to go to search. So a better user experience would be to have these things very easily accessible so that they don't have to go into search and they can just click right into it. One caveat or example of this where that wouldn't be applicable is for more technical or B2B industrial sites. A lot of times people go to those sites knowing the exact product code that they want to purchase. And so it makes the most sense for them to just pop that product code into the search bar. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're having a bad experience. It's just that they know exactly what they want, and it's easier for them to put that into the search than to try and navigate through the categories to try and find that exact product. The third thing that I like to do with a search terms report is I like to find those top search terms and go into my site and search them myself and make sure that what appears is what I want to appear, and that search result page looks correct and accurate. And, so if it doesn't, if there's items that aren't showing up that you think should be showing up, you might consider adding in a few more keywords into those products or whatever they are to help them show up for these commonly searched terms if they should be. And then the last thing is, this is a great place to find ideas or topics that you might want to center your marketing efforts around. Again, because this is your customer base telling you exactly what they're looking for, and that they're interested in that. So why not, push that product a little bit more via paid search? Maybe you send out an email on socks if people are searching for socks, and etc. Okay, so the last report is actually 3 different reports, but they're all really quick, and they are in the same grouping, so I just wanted to include them together. And the first one is going to be the audience demographics age report, and this report is going to give you a breakdown of the top age groups that are visiting your site and kind of how they're interacting with your site. So I like to look for groups that maybe aren't sending as much traffic to the site, but are spending a lot of money, because I'm going to want to try and increase traffic from that group to the site. So if I am looking through here, again, a high conversion rate is typically what I'm looking for. And I see that there's a high conversion rate within this group, and they're not one of our top drivers of traffic, but they're spending a good amount of money. So I would consider kind of targeting this age group a little bit more, maybe testing out some campaigns to that age group to see if I can bring some more people to the site, because they're spending a good amount of money with us and they have a great conversion rate. And then, of course, this is also a great place to see who's already coming to your site in terms of age group, and making sure that your site is applicable to them and relevant, and stuff that they're going to engage with and find useful, because obviously we want to maintain that current user base because they're our top user base. The next report that I look at is the audience geography location report, and I'm going to click through into the demo account because this is a really big report. But this report at the top, it's got a graph or a picture graph of your locations. I don't really use that. I would scroll straight down here, and you're going to get a breakdown of which countries are sending traffic to your site and how they're interacting with your site in different ways. If you have traffic from a lot of different countries, definitely look through and see specifically in those countries what states are sending traffic to your site or provinces. For this one, I'm going to double click into the United States section because I see that that's the majority of the traffic. And I'm going to look in these states, and again, I get a breakdown of what states are sending traffic and how they're interacting with the site. And I'm going to look for states that present opportunities. Again, going to the e-commerce conversion rate column, seeing which states have high conversion rates. And if there are any states that don't send as much traffic but have a pretty high conversion rate, I definitely want to look into those states and see if there's an opportunity to gain more traffic share from those sites, thus gaining more revenue from a state that typically has a good conversion rate. So in this case, if I go down here, I see that this has a great conversion rate. So does this. And so it's Washington and Illinois. I would want to see if there's a way that I can bring in more traffic from these 2 states and just test and see if we bring in more traffic, do we maintain this great conversion rate? And if so, then that's a great opportunity to kind of start targeting your content towards them. There's different ways that you can target your content towards them. One way would be to, maybe you can do a advertising campaign that's targeted towards that area to test that out. Or maybe you could write an article on your page that tells you that's specific to that state. So, if I had a gardening website, maybe I would write an article about the best plants to garden in Washington during the winter, which is obviously specific to Washington, and we can see that organically we'll send a few more people from Washington to the site. You can also click into the states individually and see the breakdown of cities. If you get most of your traffic from one state, then you can kind of apply the same analysis to the city report. But I usually use the state report just because I work with more sites that have traffic from several different states. All right, and the last report, I know we're a little over time, so thank you guys for sticking with me, but the last report is going to be the audience mobile overview report. This I would consider to be another low-hanging fruit report because it's if there's a problem, it's pretty obvious and you pretty much know how to fix it. So this is going to give a breakdown of what traffic's coming to your site from different devices. Now, the biggest issue that I see here is with mobile devices. And that's because maybe they're not optimized for mobile and people aren't having a great experience on mobile. And I want to check to make sure that that's not the case. And if it is the case, I want to do an audit of my mobile site to see how I can improve. So some indications that you might have an issue on mobile might be if your conversion rate on mobile is significantly lower than other devices. In this case, it's a little bit lower. I might want to do an audit, but it's not so low that I'm super concerned. You still want to consider the fact that people in your industry might not want to buy on the phone as much. So that could be a reason why the conversion rate's a little bit lower. So that kind of just is dependent on your industry. And then a significant decrease in conversion rate suddenly. So if you're doing, a month-over-month comparison and you see a big decrease in conversion rate for mobile, that could be an indication that some issues popped up that's causing people to have a bad experience on mobile. And then lastly, a high bounce rate on mobile and no other devices is an indication that people aren't really enjoying the content on mobile as much. They're landing on your site and they're clicking out maybe because they don't, it's not easy to use, or the site seems kind of sketchy on mobile. But regardless, if we can make changes that lower our bounce rate and encourage people to engage more on mobile, that's a huge win and should be reflected in mobile sales. And all of this can apply to the tablet or desktop as well. If you had a significant enough audience and we're detecting issues there, I just use mobile as an example because this is the most common place where I see issues popping up. And that is all. I just included this page because I wanted to have a page that showed all the reports together. So you guys can screenshot this or pause here and just use this as a reference, whatever. But I just wanted to provide this so that you have everything in one place. And other than that, that is all I have for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I am going to send a follow-up email from the webinar platform it includes helpful resources on setting up Google Analytics to get the best data. And I'll also be announcing who won the free technical optimization, which includes setting up Google Analytics to get the best data. And if you guys want more tips and resources similar to this one on growing your business, definitely feel free to visit the Volusion blog or the Grow a Studio blog because we have a lot of different resources that are really helpful. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. And thank you for joining.